And Director Ratcliffe, does the intelligence community assess that we are currently at war or being invaded by the nation of Venezuela?
We have no assessment that says that.
Thank you. In invoking the law, the President alleged that Tren de Agua is, quote, undertaking hostile actions against the U.S. at the direction, clandestine or otherwise, of the Maduro regime in Venezuela.
You ever watch a hearing and just think, finally someone had the guts to say what everyone's been whispering? Because that's exactly what happened when Congressman Joaquin Castro, a proud Democrat from Texas, stood up in that Intelligence Committee hearing and called the Republican bluff. And I mean, he lit into them. No hesitation, no sugarcoating, no political theater. He called it what it was, a lie to the American people. Before we get into the details, make sure you
You and I came into the Congress together in 2013. And Cash, you and I was serving on the Intelligence Committee when you worked on the Intelligence Committee. And John, you and I are both from Texas, and we both served together on the Intelligence Committee. The idea that this information, if it was presented to our committee, would not be classified, y'all know is a lie. That's ridiculous. I've seen things much less sensitive be presented to us with high classification. And to say that it isn't is a lie to the country. I want to ask the generals now. The NSA is principally in charge of intercepting things like signals intelligence from other countries. General, I want to ask you, if your organization, your agency, intercepted something like this from Russia or China or some other country, would you consider this classified information?
Representative, we would be classifying based off of our sources and methods. So those would be the things that, in terms of how we process, how we would be able to obtain the information and how we'd report it,
Sure.
we would classify based off of our source and method.
So if you knew that the Secretary of Defense and the National Security Advisor of Russia or China and the head of the Foreign Ministry and all of the folks who were associated with that signal chain, if you intercepted that information, General, would you consider it classified?
So it would be classified based off of our collection.
So the NSA would classify it, would
Based off
determine it as
of
classified.
the protection of our own source and method, not necessarily based off the content, but how we collected that information.
But it would be classified.
Well, we certainly wouldn't be collecting on a U.S. person conversation.
No, I understand. I'm saying if you did your job and collected it from the Russian Foreign Ministry and the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of Defense and the President's Chief Advisor, there is no way, having sat on this committee for 9 years, that somebody would come in with that information and give us something that says unclassified. You can walk out of this room with this information and give it to whomever you want. You know, with all respect, you and I worked on the committee at the same time. Tulsi, you and I came in together. I've never had an issue of beef with you. John, you and I are both from Texas. Y'all know that's a lie. It's a lie to the country. I want to ask about the Alien Enemies Act really quick while I have time. The President has used the Alien Enemies Act, a wartime authority last used to detain German and Japanese nationals during World War II, to summarily deport people accused of being members of the Venezuelan gang, Tren de Agua. To invoke this law, the President must demonstrate that the United States is under invasion by a foreign nation or government. They have alleged that we are under invasion by the Venezuelan government. The idea that we are at war with Venezuela would come as a surprise to most Americans. The unclassified version of the annual threat assessment the intelligence community just released makes no mention of any invasion or war that we are fighting with the nation of Venezuela. You would think our nation being at war would merit at least a small reference in this threat assessment. And Director Ratcliffe, does the intelligence community assess that we are currently at war or being invaded by the nation of Venezuela?
We have no assessment that says that.
Thank you. In invoking the law, the President alleged that Tren de Agua is, quote, undertaking hostile actions against the U.S. at the direction, clandestine or otherwise, of the Maduro regime in Venezuela. Director Gabbard, does the intelligence community assess that the Venezuelan government is directing Tren de Agua's hostile actions against the United States?
There are varied assessments that came from different intelligence community elements. I'll defer to Director Patel to speak specifically to the FBI assessment.
But let me ask you, so you're saying there are conflicting assessments that have come from the IC?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. we'll take it up in closed session. All right. You know, your threat assessment makes issue of, highlights fentanyl trafficking as a top threat to the United States, yet support for law enforcement cooperation with Mexico has been put on hold, and there's been a threat of invasion to Mexico by the United States.
To it. Here's the short version of what happened. The administration, Republican-led, invoked a wartime law, the Alien Enemies Act, to deport Venezuelan immigrants. They justified it by claiming the United States was being invaded by Venezuela through a gang called Tren Agua. Think about that for a second. The same law used during World War II to detain Germans and Japanese nationals is now being dusted off in 2025 to target Venezuelans. And the kicker? The intelligence community has no evidence, none, that we're at war with or being invaded by Venezuela. Let's call that what it is. Political theater weaponized as policy. Castro, who served on the House Intelligence Committee for nearly a decade, didn't let that slide. He looked his former colleagues, people like John Ratcliffe, Tulsi Gabbard and the generals, in the eye and said, "That's ridiculous. You know that's a lie." And he was right, because he knows how classified intelligence works. He's seen how even minor details are stamped top secret. Yet somehow, this supposedly invasion-level intelligence wasn't classified. Give me a break. What Castro did in that hearing wasn't just righteous anger. It was a masterclass in accountability. He exposed how Republicans were twisting national security law to justify fear-mongering and deportations. He showed how the system bends when those in power want to protect themselves, and how the truth becomes optional when it doesn't serve their agenda. And that's what gets me fired up. Because real patriots, real Americans, don't hide behind fake wars or phantom invasions to score political points. They defend the truth, even when it's inconvenient. Let's talk about that double standard Castro called out. He asked the generals straight up, if the NSA intercepted a similar conversation between Russian officials, say their foreign minister, their national security advisor, their defense secretary, would that be classified? The general said, yes, absolutely. But when the same kind of sensitive information involves U.S. officials, suddenly it's unclassified. That's not just hypocrisy. It's manipulation of the classification system to protect people in power. And look, this isn't about left versus right for the sake of partisanship. This is about whether or not we live in a democracy where facts still matter. When you have intelligence officials pretending that sensitive information isn't classified just because it's politically inconvenient, that's corruption in broad daylight. You know what else is wild? The unclassified national threat assessment from the intelligence community. Their own report doesn't even mention Venezuela as a threat. Not once. No mention of an invasion. No mention of hostile actions from the Maduro government. And yet the administration went ahead and invoked wartime powers anyway. That's like declaring martial law because you heard a rumor on Twitter. Let's be clear, that's not national security. That's political desperation. It's an attempt to manufacture a crisis, to create fear and justify harsh immigration policies under the guise of defending America. And this is where I want to speak as a left-wing patriot. I love this country. I believe in the principles that make it worth defending: truth, accountability, justice, and equality. But loving your country doesn't mean letting leaders lie to you. It means holding them to a higher standard. It means saying, no, you don't get to weaponize patriotism to cover up incompetence or deceit. That's exactly what Castro did. He didn't just challenge the narrative. He reminded everyone in that room that democracy depends on truth. When politicians manipulate intelligence to fit their political goals, they're not protecting America. They're protecting themselves. And look at the pattern here. Every time there's political trouble, whether it's an economic slump, a scandal, or an election year, you get this recycled rhetoric about invasions, threats, and enemies. It's the oldest trick in the book. Create fear, control the narrative, and silence dissent in the name of security. But here's the thing. That trick only works when people stop paying attention, when they stop asking questions, when they stop demanding proof. And that's why what Castro did matters so much. Because he wasn't just speaking to the officials in that hearing, he was speaking to all of us. He was saying, don't buy the spin. Look at the facts. Demand the truth. The United States is not at war with Venezuela. There is no invasion. What there is a group of powerful people trying to stretch wartime law for political gain. That's not patriotism. That's authoritarianism dressed up as national security. And I'll tell you this. Real patriots don't need to lie to defend their country. They don't need to twist the law to attack vulnerable immigrants or invent threats to look strong. Real patriots tell the truth, even when it costs them politically. So to everyone watching, don't let this story fade into the background noise. Share it. Talk about it. Ask your representatives why a law used to detain Japanese Americans during World War II is being used again in 2025 under false pretenses. Because if we stay silent, this kind of abuse becomes normalized. This isn't just about Venezuela. It's about the integrity of our democracy. It's about whether facts still mean anything when they get in the way of power. Joaquin Castro stood up and said what needed to be said, and it's on us to keep that conversation alive. So if you believe in truth over propaganda, in accountability over power, in democracy over deception, then hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe. Because this fight isn't just political, it's moral. And it's time we start treating it that way. The truth should never be optional.